So I hope we'll get some live for the rest of the afternoon, and thank you for staying on. As it was just said, we are moving from an agency perspective into an industry perspective. I would also add we go beyond the astronaut also to the entrepreneur and the technology behind. I like the point on ignition, so you need to ignite, but you need to sustain. So we move from inspiration and exploration into something that has a clear market and exploitation focus. And I think we'll introduce in a few minutes what I call maybe the rock stars of what is the new space era in front. And we'll have a global coverage from Japan, US, Australia, Europe. We have C-level participants from marketing and sales and business developments. And I think we'll see a part of what was called earlier on the Renaissance. We'll zoom in into the market aspect on the institutional side and also on the commercial end. We'll ask ourselves the question, if you go in PPPs, public-private partnership, and you're on the private side, you want to be able to rely on the public side, so you need reliable partners. And you may also have to diversify. It's about infrastructures, we talked a lot about this, but also about data, services, research. It's about near Earth, LEO, the Moon, and Mars, that in some places has gained new importance. We'll see in how far this is relevant for business. So we move from government to government agreements, barter, times of barter, to something where it's maybe business to business, where also behind business there's still a government as an anchor. It's a lot about what is the risk factor with the anchor. There is a notion of return on investment in these debates and the business cases. So we look into questions on how do you sell on a global market in the trade war or on the trade uncertainties as they unfold around us. How do you diversify across world regions, infrastructures, maybe between Moon and near Earth orbit? It has been mentioned, not too much, but it has been mentioned, what happened Friday last week, the cuts announced in the US on NASA, and there will be questions on de-risking. How do you deal with this eventually if you're a business? There's also going to be a question on the European angle and the role of Europe. And if we have time, we'll talk about celebrity launches. And with this, I would like to invite our speakers, and I start with Jackie Cortese. If you can come up, please. Senior Director for Civil Space at Blue Origin, from Sicily, from the US. Vincenzo Giorgio, Vice President, Institutional Marketing and Sales, Thales Alenia Space, Italy. Buongiorno, benvenuto. Jeremy Hallett, Chairman, Space Industry Association of Australia. We're looking forward to see you in Sydney very soon. I think we have a replacement, so Max could not make it with a delay in the schedule, so we'll welcome David Caponio. Yes. Senior Vice President, Business Development at VAST. And now okay. And we have Trent, if you can move aside, because I need the names. Trent Martin, Senior Vice President of Space Systems, Intuitive Machines. And last but not least, Atsushi Sakai with the best costume. And I like the business angle of this. Executive Fellow at iSpace. A big applause to those rock stars of the future. So with this, I think we jumped right into the discussion. I have a mic and it works. And actually we start in the sequence of how you're sitting. That's a coincidence. Jackie. I think you are maybe in a situation where the de-risking, we go straight into de-risking NASA US situation, maybe private capital, self-funded activities. So there is on the one side the institutional anchor, but there's also business case and capital power in companies. Maybe you can say a few words on how do you deal with such a situation? How do you de-risk? How do you balance?
Yeah, thank you. I would say, so at Blue Origin, one, we have a great relationship with NASA. We partner with them a lot. Those partnerships are going to continue. So I'll just say that straight out. But before we were selected for the Human Landing System program in May of 2023, I think a lot of people wouldn't have even considered Blue Origin a government contractor. We were doing largely privately funded work, developing our capabilities. So, our work with NASA will continue. But our goal has remained unchanged since Blue Origin started in 2000, which is developing a set of commercial space capabilities that will increase access to space. That's purely what it has always been, and that's never changed. So with New Shepard, we're trying to get as many people and payloads to experience space as possible. With New Glenn, our commercial heavy lift launch vehicle, we want more, bigger, 1 million payloads, and ultimately we want to fly people on New Glenn too. With our lunar program that's been going on actually since 2017 on a continuous basis, we want to establish a lunar permanence, a permanent human presence on the moon. And then with all of our capabilities, including our Blue Ring multi-orbit vehicle, we just are, again, the same goal, commercial capabilities to unlock access to space for more people, more science, and more exploration. So regardless of changes in governments or other factors, that's always been the Blue Origin goal, and that's what we continue to do. So in light of any changes, the best thing we can do and what we plan to do is, we had our successful first launch of New Glenn this year. Hopefully some people saw that. We were very excited. We're going to land our Blue Moon Mark 1 lander on the moon later this year. It will be actually larger than the Apollo lander, so that's our big goal. We're excited about that. And shortly thereafter, we'll do the first flight of our Blue Ring multi-orbit vehicle. So we're staying the path and working to fly as much as possible. That's our vision. And the last thing I would just say is, it's cool to develop all these capabilities, right? It's awesome that our goal is increase access to space. But all of that is kind of for naught if you don't have partners that want to use the capabilities and do cool things at the places you're going. So, I would just encourage us to, in times of uncertainty especially, to think outside the box on ways that we could work together. Maybe more US international industry joint proposals to governments, maybe some more mission sort of ideating that we could do together, because at least at Blue Origin, our path and objectives are clear and continuing. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, very clear. So more partnership and maybe a diversified base also. And looking forward to something bigger than the Apollo lander. That's exciting indeed. Vincenzo, so you have marvelous products. You have, I think, you have a reputation to deliver on schedule and cost and be cost effective, I think. And at the same time, in these days of trade uncertainties, if you sell across the oceans, there are some questions. So I give an example I know from a previous life. I remember OneWeb satellites used to be produced in Toulouse and no longer so. So they're on the other side of the pond. What can you say in your situation? How can we deal? How do you mitigate this? And how can we respond to this situation?
Well, of course, when talking about trades, and you have to be always careful and following the line on what is really happening all around. And the only thing you can put on the table is, first of all, and you say the experience and the fact that this experience comes from decades of delivery on time, on schedule, and a capability to improve the technical capability of our products, the fact that you invest yourself with CapEx into the delivery of new products, and this brings you into a, let's say, more comfortable situation, a situation in which your product is being appreciated wherever you sell it. You can sell to the agency, you can sell to a commercial operator. And what we are approaching today is just the fact that, at least in low Earth orbit, but it will soon happen around and on the moon as well, the model is changing. Operators are just getting their plan to have low Earth orbit space stations, and we are discussing, as you can imagine, with all of them. What you can bring is your capability of your products. What you can bring is the possibility to fit with the requirements, even if they are different. Of course, you have to deal with possibilities of trades, but trades goes in either way. So therefore, we do buy products from a certain country and we sell the end product to the same country. So therefore, we have to also to consider the fact that the end customer could be in the place where the trade are coming from. So there is no way else than establishing a right business plan. And we have been learning, as you said, we have this very large experience in low Earth orbit with the International Space Station, which was purely institutional. So institutional customer asking you to do something and you deliver. But even in the International Space Station, we started a different model when cargo resupply service came. And what we are doing today with the Senius is a model which is more what is going to be low Earth orbit in the near future. So we are learning from there, and we are still considering, because we should keep in mind that our agencies, which are national agencies, European space agencies, and international space agencies, will still be there first. Second, will always have their role, which can be anchor customer or which can be agency that, let's say, buys the infrastructure itself. It depends on a case by case, or even, I would say, on a destination by destination. So what you have to do yourself as industry is to get prepared, to get flexible, and to have the possibility to approach the market segment, whatever the requirements are.
Yes. The only thing I would add is you have a ministry that is named Made in Italy, and I hope it will remain to be made in Italy, and also the intellectual property rights attached to it. But this is just a comment as a European Space Policy Institute, if you like. I jump to the other side of our table, Atsushi.
Yes.
It was already mentioned, international cooperation, and I think the point you made when we talked early on is you are diversifying, and I think also your shirt is a demonstration of this. Yes. Can you maybe elaborate on this, because you have certainly a track record on this?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me and iSpace here in this conference. Yes, in the previous panel, as you heard, agencies and agencies, government and government, they are doing whatever collaboration they can do. But iSpace was established in 2010. We're only 14 plus 8 years old, young, with only 300 people. However, we have an entity or office in 3 locations in the world. Head office, where we're stock listed, is in Japan, but we also have an entity in USA, Denver, and also Luxembourg. And in order to achieve our vision, I think it's very important that we involve each commercial companies, not just the agencies or the government. And that's how there's a role, even in a small, young company like us, to dedicate in this international collaboration. One example, as Mr. Armari mentioned, our mission 1, we had the main prime customer was an MBRC rover. And in mission 2, which is cruising now to the moon, we have one payload from a Swedish client called Moonhouse, and also one of the shovel, which we have in Luxembourg-made rover, is produced by a Epiroc. They're our partner in Sweden. So we are doing this kind of a collaboration. And by the way, it was a coincidence in terms of timing, but this morning we succeeded in entering lunar orbit successfully.
Bravo.
So we are looking forward to the next step.
Applause.
Thank you. And our landing challenge of this mission to lander is expected in the Indian time, June 6, 0054 a.m. So maybe after the midnight. So maybe you can see it after you watch the cricket game. So you will wake up late anyway. So I think that would be a good after cricket match enjoyment. And that's the mission 2. And mission 3, we also have, of course, a CP12 contract from CLEPS program together with the Draper. But in addition to that, we have a payload from ASI, the Italian Space Agency, and also Romanian client. And in India, we already have MOU with the 2 companies. One is a HEX-20. We are collaborating and discussing for future lunar orbit missions. And also Digantara, who's a very famous local Indian company, we are discussing with them for the lunar SSA collaboration in future. So this is what we're doing. But what we're trying to do, and I think this is very important, I think the government, agency, commercial company, and academia, these are like 4 wheels in the car. So we have to make sure each wheel is facing the same direction. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere. And this is not just the one country base, but even within the country and country collaboration, we make sure that what our government and the opposite government is trying to do is in line with what agencies are trying to do, including our JAXA. And also what we are trying to do matches that kind of the direction. So I think that's very key, important factor.
I would add, maybe you need more than one car, because there could always be a car that gets stuck. So it's not about a car with 20 wheels, but maybe it's multiple cars with 4 wheels. But I think there is a leitmotif here already of diversification also in terms of partnership. But I would like to jump from the moon to closer to Earth, and that would bring me to David. David, there is a lot of market drive in what you do. There's also a dependency with an anchor customer. So maybe the same question. You are based in the US. So what is life like for you these days?
Certainly, there's a lot to talk about, both on panels and in private conversations. The last couple of months with, I'd say, the dynamicism that exists in our government. But yes, we basically are tracking these events closely, especially as it relates to our major objective, which is to win the commercial LEO destination program. That's what we hope to do with our Haven 2 architecture that we announced a couple months ago at last IAC. And specifically, we hope to leapfrog our competition with actual hardware on orbit. And that's why we intend to launch Haven 1, world's first commercial space station. But yes, as I mentioned, first and foremost, NASA is our anchor customer with that program. But their expectation is not to be the owner-operator and the 100% owner-operator of it, but to be that anchor customer. And that includes collaboration with international space agencies around the globe, much akin to the way we are collaborating on the ISS today. But the challenge there is to do that in a commercial mindset. So that's not direct funded government ownership of modules, of programs, that sort of thing, but really a commercial model that we take from a cargo resupply service and the success there, the crew resupply service and the success there, and taking that model and just translating it to a destination. So we don't have to trailblaze as much. It's actually very well tested with the players that are delivering crew and cargo today. But to do it with a destination in a collaborative fashion. And one key element that we want to highlight with Haven 2, with our CLD architecture, is its modularity. And really, modularity in an approach where we can scale the architecture to meet the demand of the actual market that manifests itself. So we know it exists with NASA. We're starting to understand what exists with ESA and JAXA as well, and starting to understand what could exist in other corners of the globe that are not current partners on the ISS. So that's what's most interesting to us today. But the architecture allows for when those needs and when that program is instantiated, to bring that other partner along with our architecture that's scalable from its baseline capability, which is for NASA. So that's what we want to kind of bring to that program. The additional element beyond the international collaborators is the commercial market, which is more dynamic than a sovereign agency's needs. So we have to adjust to those as well. So we're not locked into one specific size or dependency. We're truly scalable to what will be manifested in the next few years' time. CLD is fast approaching. The proposal is due in space time frame like tomorrow, but at the end of this year, in reality, with selection mid next year, we understand that the collaborators are kind of waiting for that decision. I mean, for NASA to choose you, not only to be the anchor customer with its utilization and funding that comes with it, but really its validation. You are the preferred partner, maybe hopefully one or two, as NASA has announced, and without that validation, it becomes an uphill climb. So it's very challenging. It's much more challenging business-wise than the ISS is, but we get to take the advantages of a 3-decade-old platform with a lot of lessons learned. We've had close collaboration with NASA for the last 2 years in technical and operations perspective. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're relying on the backs of that program, and we're excited to bring it into the next generation.
Yeah. I think I'd distinguish between the way you execute, which is commercially driven, and you say maybe the rate of innovation dynamics are higher on the private side than elsewhere, to put it this way. But I guess you depend on money that is not only the public money and the private money. Some banks may look into how solid your anchors are. So I think there's a way to go before the market return really carries the case. But I think this is a challenge for most of us here. With this, maybe we go to Australia. And I think you're not about to launch a space station or the likes, but when we talked, I think we really looked into where are the niches, where are the things where you really can make a contribution, and I think you have a few points to bring forward.
Yes, thank you, and hello, GLEX. Nice to be with you. I think Australia's experience is instructive probably for most countries, because most countries will not have an industrial base capable of building and launching commercial space stations or government-owned space stations. And Jackie, you kind of touched on the point about you have the infrastructure, what about the utilisation? And I think that's where Australia's industry and indeed as government is really focused. And to contextualise that a little bit, we'd also just talked about de-risking the vagaries of governments and their decisions about funding. The reality is in Australia, and I say this without complaint, is that there is no government funding for space exploration currently. And the reasons for that are kind of reasonable. One is there's a values-based assessment that there is no industrial base currently to support that. And secondly, in terms of sentiment about social licence and what the Australian public expects, particularly we talk about cost of living crisis currently, the Australian taxpayer would rather see money spent on things that they perceive to be benefiting their lives back on Earth than perhaps what the Australian citizen might view as a bit more science fiction, given our kind of recent entry into space and space technology. And so where does that leave industry and actually academia as an extension of that is about how we can leverage what other people are sinking billions of dollars into in terms of space infrastructure to develop leapfrog technologies that benefit life back here on Earth. And one area that we're really bullish about as the peak body for space in Australia, and I see an increasing emerging expertise within the Australian space sector, both industry and academia, is the exploitation of hopefully a proliferation of microgravity environments to develop new technologies, to research into new techniques that then can be applicable to life back here on Earth. One I'm really excited about that's ongoing in Australia at the moment is a program called Plants for Space, which actually has attracted some government money, $90 million from the Australian government, plus industry and academic consortium to look at the development of agricultural and horticultural products in microgravity, with the main aim of bringing that back here to Earth for the benefit of life on Earth. And you go from that through to materials. In particular, Australia has strengths around synthetic diamonds. And so how can we look at growing synthetic diamonds in a microgravity environment for different structures and speed of manufacture and bring that back here on Earth for benefit of citizenry. One final point I might make, totally separate to the utilisation piece, and an interesting one to consider, is Australia has a largely untapped financing market for the future of space infrastructure once it becomes more mainstream. We have a compulsory pension fund scheme in Australia, and Australian pension funds currently manage about $2.7 trillion worth of assets, and they love infrastructure. Currently they buy airports and toll roads and shopping centres, long-term holds, yield play. I believe future commercial space infrastructure will be the same once that utilisation spins up and you hold those assets for a long time. And so I'm excited that as the Australian sector shows the value of that infrastructure in space over the long term, that unlocks the financing opportunities from the Australian financing sector as well.
Excellent. And with this, you are, as you say, you are probably the majority of world regions, and not everybody walks in with a rocket and a LEO station or a moonlander. But you made an interesting point that there is no support, no public funding support in Australia. And I think the public side is missing the point you are making here. It's not just about building hardware. I think it's the wider benefit. And I'm sure we'll come to this also elsewhere when it's really about where do you tap in. And it could be a funding source like the pension funds. It could also be public funding, but it could also be an industry sector that actually is ready to go. Yeah, I think this is in many instances completely underdeveloped. I think in the agency talks, nobody mentioned pension funds. Would be an interesting dynamics to go beyond airports and get space into some of these mechanics. I think it's an excellent point. With this, I'd like to move to Trent, and I think, Trent, you have a few points here that may echo some of this, but maybe one point that is specific for you. When we discussed earlier on, the diversification could also be in terms of where you actually travel, whether it's the moon or it's a geo orbit or it's a LEO orbit. So there may be different things, and I think you also mentioned the industry sectors that may be interesting to tap into. Please, Trent.
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me to come and talk today. I appreciate it. The leadership at Intuitive Machines basically came out of NASA. We all have gray hair. We all have been around long enough to realize that programs come and go within agencies like NASA. So you have to be able to weather those changes that are going to occur. As you start a small company, you don't have a contract. Maybe you get one, and that's the one that you have to rely on. Once you go and land on the south pole of the moon, all of a sudden you start winning others. Last year, we picked up the Lunar Terrain Vehicle contract. We picked up the Near Space Network Services contract, the OMS contract. Recently, we got a contract from the state of Texas to build a low Earth orbit reentry vehicle for pharmaceutical research in low Earth orbit. As a company, we recognized that we couldn't just rely on lunar landers to build the company. What if things changed? What if the moon became a four-letter word like it did at the end of Constellation? What would you do? And so we went out and intentionally bid on other contracts. We started looking at other sources of funding. There's not, in fact, in the United States, the majority of space funding is not NASA. The majority of the funding is other agencies. So outside of the United States, there are a lot of international space agencies that don't have the funding to build a space base on the surface of the moon, but they do have enough funding to put a rover on the moon, or to put an instrument onto a lander that wants to go to the moon, or onto an orbiter that wants to go around, that is going around the moon, say on our Near Space Network Services satellites, what we call our Lunar Data Network satellites. So we actively go and look for those types of ways to diversify our portfolio such that if one takes a hit, we still have remaining work available. We've been very successful with that. When I started with the company in 2017, we had 40 people. We now have 450 people, and we're diversified across all 6 of those areas I just mentioned.
Yeah, this is impressive. I think we come to this experience of how you grew so quick. Listening to all of you, really, I think this diversification, it's really at the beginning. If you look at a lot of the presentations by agencies, it still looks like the plan where you do A, B, C. I think here it's more on a matrix, and this matrix is quite dynamic, and I guess it gives you resilience. And I think in what we call public-private, to build this more strongly on the 2 sides, I think it's good. So we need these multiple cars and different orbits and celestial bodies. With this, I'd like to go back and, out of order, we go back to Australia. And I think when we discussed, you mentioned also another use case, what you actually can do on the lunar surface. And maybe Australia has, you're a big continent, so you have some experience in some things like mining, maybe.
Yeah, and if you'll indulge me, I'll put in a quick plug for IAC in Sydney later this year. So our theme for that conference is Sustainable Space, Resilient Earth, which is made up of 3 areas where we see the use of space for sustaining life here on Earth, the sustainable use of space, and sustaining life off Earth, all of which I think plays into space exploration. And one of the ways we're trying to capture all those elements into IAC is by trying to bring adjacent sectors into the IAC, which frankly, as space people, we struggle at in general. A lot of space conferences are space people talking to space people. What about the other industries that have something to offer to us, or the other industries that are going to be our customers, like the pharmaceutical industry, for example, we just heard about? A big one for us in Australia is the oil and gas and the mining sector. About half of Australia's GDP is made up from the exploitation of natural resources, mining, oil and gas, agriculture, fisheries, forestry, but mining, oil and gas is the big one. And I did tell a lie before about there being no government money for space exploration. There is a government program that will be putting a rover on the moon sometime this decade, flying on one of the GLEX missions. It's called the Rover, based off the kangaroo. And so there is some funding for there, but why that program is important is it's been delivered under a consortium approach, which is including mining companies. And what they are bringing to the table is both their ability to operate in harsher environments. We dig up large amounts of iron ore from the Pilbara region of Australia, which is actually almost a Martian-like environment. And I think colleagues here have been there before to view it as a Mars analogue. But there's also the remote operations aspect. The Pilbara region where this mining is undertaken is thousands of kilometres from any city where any workers actually are. And a lot of these mines are fully automated these days. There are more unmanned vehicles on the mine sites in Australia than there are in any other place on Earth. And so the expertise Australia has around operating in harsher environments from the equipment perspective, and also those remote operations, I look forward to seeing us spin in to the space sector as we return to the moon and go on to Mars, so that expertise can play into what you all are doing as you're putting things there. And I think Intuitive Machines is already making use of some Australian remote operations capability, potentially as a segue for this round of questioning.
Well, let me just say that because you named it after a kangaroo, you should have made a hopper, in which case we could have helped you. Yes, we actually are working with a mining and an oil and gas company in Australia, and we do operations out of Australia. And in fact, we have a lot of international collaboration across all of our missions. I don't have a single mission where I don't have some international collaboration. We're flying international payloads. We have partnerships in Europe on LTV, in France and in Austria, as well as in Australia. We buy parts from Europe. We buy parts from Japan. We buy components all over the world for all of our missions. So international is easy for us to go do. And I will say, I've heard a lot today about reliable partners. As a commercial company, if you partner with a commercial company, we're extremely reliable. There's a contract that we have to fulfill. And so you don't end up with the people that just pull out of a collaboration because we have a contract to go complete those collaborations, and we will do that. And as a company, we have to do that.
And thank you for creating this own dynamic. I could maybe actually unplug myself from the panel if anybody wants to contribute. The one thing I would say, I like the reliability. In space system design, what you do is redundancy, right? And this is another word for resilience. So you have maybe more than one partnership, and it makes the whole case a bit more reliable. But I think you all go into this narrative. It's very consistent across the board. And I believe we are at the beginning of a decade where this is only going to materialize and become much, much more visible. It's no ISS times anymore. Yeah. But Trent, I had another point for you, and that was not to do with what you do up there and what your business is like. It was really, and you mentioned it briefly, you grew from a few people to what I think 450 in no time. So this is part of what some people call new space, or maybe you know new space anymore. But this is new dynamics. So can you maybe give an idea, how does this feel in something that's historically institutional? What is your experience?
Well, one of the ways that we've grown is that the larger, more established companies have been unwilling to take the firm fixed price service-based contracts that the US government is currently offering. We're willing to take on those risks. And in fact, we offer time and material contracts to the Boeings and the Northrop Grummans of the world to come be our subcontractor on a lot of that work. That allows us to take the risk on the firm fixed price, which we're willing to do. They're unwilling to do it, so they take on the time and material piece as a subcontractor to us, so we get that experience that they have with the new space capability that we have. The trick to it is maintaining that new space agile approach to building hardware. The quick iteration, 2 months you have a new piece of hardware, you're testing it. Every 2 months you're building something new and moving quickly. That is hard to maintain as you put more and more processes in place. So we actually have to push against that tide that comes moving in as you get larger and larger that says, let's put more processes in place, let's stifle some of the creativity. So we actually push against those processes as they come in. You have to have some processes, obviously. We're an AS9100 company, we have processes that fit within the industry standards, but we make them tailorable, and we actually allow our team to tailor them as we move forward in different projects. Some projects may be more advanced, and say, for instance, the Lunar Terrain Vehicle has very specific human spaceflight requirements. I can err on one side of the pendulum versus, say, our Zephyr project, which is our low Earth orbit reentry vehicle, where we're in the early stages. So I can move fast, fail forward, and move quickly.
Yeah, I think it's the speed of innovation is another element that changes across the whole space sector, right?
Well, and it's not just the speed of innovation. So we're a publicly traded company. It's the expected return on your investment from the finance market is very fast, right? It's not 30 years. It's not the time of a space station or a space shuttle or even an Artemis program. And in fact, if you're looking at it in terms of government entities, it's like one administration in the United States. It's 4 years. You have to do something within 4 years. You have to go fly something. You have to prove that you can do something quickly, or the markets start to lose faith and money starts to drop out. You need the money to continue to flow in, so you need a stable set of contracts. You need regular proof points that you're delivering and that the revenue is coming in for the financial markets to continue to invest in you as a company.
It is impressive that you say this as a space exploration company, because most people will say this is really long term, and before something really comes back as a return, you say 4 years.
Well, the financial markets would like it even less than that, right? They like very, very short term. That is a long term for the financial markets. But the reality is, what I used to say when I worked within the agency, within NASA, was if you couldn't do something in one administration's term, you might as well forget about it, because you're likely to have it change. because that's just what happens. A new administration comes in, they change the goalpost, and it moves to a different place, and you have to change anyway. The agencies have been very good at just adapting, moving, flowing different directions. But as a company, you can't do that. You start to lose employees, you start to lose revenue. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy on the way down. You don't want that. You want it on the way up. So in order to do that, you have to be able to succeed quickly, and that means proof points. You have to be out there delivering.
Yes. Now I was just thinking as we were talking, if we had a time machine and we turned back time with us sitting here, I exclude myself for a moment, and you go back 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, at some point, I think the only person that would still be sitting here would be Vincenzo. What is interesting, Vincenzo, is also you're the only European, no pun intended, but the point is we have the US, we have Japan. When it comes to building new enterprise and businesses, you are extremely successful in what you do. So your product, we said that. But at the same time, the kind of what we just heard from Trent, this dynamic, this growth, this speed, how does this look from your end? And I would extend the question, because you are the European next to myself, if you want. What is the role in Europe? How do we deal with this? How can we make sure that maybe in the next future, next to you, you have a few other people that are on a different time scale?
What you just mentioned, if we would not have had a two administration agency like NASA, we would not have had James Webb Telescope, we would not have had Cassini on Saturn and things like that, which is not just destination of the mission, but is the technology that goes behind it that now we all are using. Then, coming to your point, definitely things are changing, and you cannot rely on the model that we've been working with in the last decades. So what you have to do is, first of all, to understand what you want to have as a role. And we live in Europe without having this big financial market behind. Somebody is trying, but nevertheless, is not as strong as it is in the US and in other countries. So what we do, what we have to do, is first of all to decide what we want to do and what we want to be. And I'm just very easy when we make examples. I was speaking about the commercial space station. So our company, undoubtedly, can build whatever piece of a station, but you need to be within certain cost, certain time, and you have to be reliable. But you have also to decide what your role is. I mean, you can either be in the supply chain, big supply chain, number of billion dollars or euros, the way you like, but you may want also to decide to become a partner. And this is one of the crucial points we are dealing with in this very moment, to understand what the role of European industries needs to be. So there are cases in which you feel much more comfortable because it's much less risky, that you are in the supply chain, you know what you do, you know what you have to do, and therefore that goes in the way that, some shareholder much prefer, because you have no risk. But this is not what we are aiming to do. This is not what Europe has the power to do, and I'm speaking not only on my company, which of course is one of the major actors, if not the major actor, but it's also a European trend. So when we decide that rather than being in the supply chain, we want to actively participate to it, you have first to be ready to take a risk associated with that. Second, you have to believe in what is the business plan, the expected market, and you have to participate with it. And third, which is another important point, you have to be part of the operation as well as of the utilization of an infrastructure. So today we have been used to have a sort of fragmented activity. Somebody was building, somebody was making operation, somebody was making utilization, and the market is more or less a captive market. Let me say one thing. Even in the next decade, we will have agency as anchor customer for the utilization. Either it is bringing stuff on the moon or, let's say, making operation in low Earth orbit. It's exactly the same. We will have a lot of experiment that will fly because the agency will be, let's say, the guarantee for them. And we are used to it in Italy because for the Italian Space Agency, every payload we have been asked to support them, to fly them, to take the data. Now the situation is going to be different if we decide, and we are in the process too, making a decision if we want to be a partner rather than a supplier. And this is the basic point that today we have to solve within European industries.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent point. And I think you mentioned shareholders. Shareholder value now, they don't like risk, they go for supply and they sell products. Easy case. Yes. Point taken. But very, very interesting and very, I think it's adding to the overall picture yet a different angle. I think most people here, they wouldn't see themselves as a supplier. I think almost everybody talks about, I do maybe hardware, but I also talk about utilization, maybe increasingly so, and also it's the utilization that gets you the money in the business case and not just the piece of hardware. So I think the commercial side has understood a few things already. Now with this, let me go back to the moon, iSpace. I think when we discussed, you also made a point, you already made the point on the diversification in terms of world regions, and you have a broader base to work across the planet. You also made a point on, say, the hardware and the transportation versus the data business or the value-adding services. Can you elaborate?
Yes, let me maybe explain in two ways. First one is the revenue stream. Yes, now is a payload transportation services our main revenue stream, but we would also like to add this to the data business, which is a scientific and environmental business data that we can obtain from the cislunar environment or the lunar surface, and we can sell that to the maybe commercial companies who's interested in entering to this space business. And third one is in our mission 3. This is the one with the Draper with the clips. We're going to the far side of the moon. And so we need to communicate with the lander. So we will be having 2 relay satellites to be deployed before landing. And as you know, NASA is not buying the equipment, they're buying our service. So this 2 relay satellite will be our asset. And they will still be alive, hopefully, after we serve NASA. So the challenge is how we can monetize that. And whoever's going to the far side of the moon, if we already have that in place, it's a duplicate and no need for new people to, just bring their own. So maybe we can collaborate and work together for that. So that's another type of a revenue stream that I'm talking about. The second aspect is where the money is coming from. Now, as you mentioned, the government money is very important, very big, and very life-saving money that we are fighting to obtain. Same with the Intuitive Machine, I think. But we are competing. But I think in future, we should have, in order to create cislunar economy, as we mentioned, more money should be coming from commercial side, commercial companies. And maybe proportion will be, I don't know, 50-50 or something like that in future. I think that is the sound condition if we talk about creating cislunar economy. And I think this is iSpace responsibility to let these commercial companies understand why they should go to the moon. What is the advantage? Where is ROI? How can that new technology innovation can be fed back to Earth, and that will be the differentiating factor to them in terrestrial business, so that the entry barrier is lower. One example, in Mission 2, we have one company, Takasago Thermal, it's a Japanese company. They have technology to split water to hydrogen and oxygen. And they have their payload to accommodated in our mission too. So as far as I understand, this would be first time ever historical environment to actually split water to hydrogen and oxygen in lunar environment. And this is happening in June, if we land safe. And I think, this time we'll bring in pure water from Japan, or the Japanese company produced. But if the water is found on the lunar surface, this will be a good first step. And I think this is very important that many technologies that global automobile, construction company, general contractors, energy company, EPC contractor, all these companies having such kind of technology that can be utilized in a lunar environment. And I think this is our responsibility to find that and work with them. Now, lastly, additionally, it's not a funding, but what we were doing in Mission 1 was we created, together with MSAD, Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance Company, Moon Insurance. Until now, there is a launch insurance, there is a satellite insurance, but there is no landing or moon insurance because it was a government project and no need for insurance coverage. But being a commercial company, startup, we wanted to cover at least some portion of the money to get back if we failed. And we did do hard landing, or we failed in Mission 1, and we did get money back. We did pay premium. So in order to do that, myself and other members, together with the insurance company, visited many underwriters in Europe to explain about our mission, to explain about the insurance. So if we have insurance, maybe it's easier for new commercial company to come enter this space business. Yes. And that's what we're trying to do at the moment.
Excellent. I find it remarkable that you say, as a commercial company and not as a government entity here, that you feel it is your responsibility to make the sectors understand, which is very appreciated and noble, and I find it remarkable. It's a very strong statement.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, I think that will help us, not just as iSpace single company, but we're doing this for all this human being, to cover, save this beautiful planet of Earth. Excellent. And I think that's one of our things that.
Yeah, that brings me back to David. And in fact, we discussed something similar. The question we had looked into is it really the public, or is it more the private side that looks into what kind of usage do you do, and which research you would invest? We said today a lot of money is still public money, but you just said 50-50 in the future. So what is the mix? Do you take, where do you take the inspiration? What research should be done?
In terms of the mix of funding, the other side of that coin on the commercial side is a little bit unknown, so I can't really give you a ratio today. And a lot of that is a little bit more near term to what you're actually building. So, governments are at least a little bit more far-term thinking, a little bit more risk-taking in this perspective by being that anchor customer. And the commercial entity will kind of see what's successful in that model and then jump in, when the moment's right. Their particular kind of mission reaction time expectation is much sooner than the traditional cycle of going to the space station, which is about a 3-year or so wait time commitment. And the research of a pharmaceutical company is usually on a 6-month time frame. Okay, well, we have a drug needs to go through a 6-month thing. Can you get us to space and back with the 6 months? And today it's just not possible. So we're pretty excited about finding that anchor, capturing that anchor customer, having them develop us to a much more reactive commercial capability. And NASA, ESA, and JAXA are very much attuned to fostering us to make sure that happens. Another thing, too, that we wanted to prove out first, even before CLD, as I mentioned, launching Haven 1, 4 crew members, but really going to a laboratory. And going to a laboratory that we've already populated with 5 partners, 4 of which are outside of the US, 3 of which are European, 1 Japanese as well. So we've, rather than kind of putting it in a proposal or a PowerPoint chart or an Excel file, we really want to test that actual commercial marketplace in space with real hardware and real projects before, hopefully before the CLD selection even happens. It's a lot more fun as our team of engineers and even business developers too, to actually get real hardware, fly it to space, come back down with a real product for profit generation. That is really the validation of the commercial model in and of itself. The Haven 1 station represents the first time that it could be done commercially and done with crew on board. You have the hand of the astronaut there to kind of be there if there's any difficulties, and really a much more precise instrument, and make sure that project comes to success. So that said, it highlights the public-private partnership, but really going out and leaning forward and really doing a project in space first and prove it out on a limited scale. It's much smaller than the ISS, but having that first few success stories, the first few killer apps that come back down, and have a business line or business plan that actually comes back in the black. Yeah. Rather than just, a government project, you went to space, you proved something, it's great, but you actually proved a market.
Very, very interesting. So you do not just wait for the user requirement and the science requirement, you also basically go prior to the public action. I think this is an important element. It was mentioned in different sectors of space, and I think it's the way to go. With this, and we're getting almost close to the end of our discussion here, which is regrettable, but we started with Jackie and we will conclude with Jackie, and I cannot resist the question, and I think you have not been to space yet, as far as I know, but there have been some celebrities, besides yourself, but you were not on board, that went to space, and there was a bit of controversy whether this was a good thing or a bad thing for space, and some people said this is now giving an image, space is for billionaires, and it's not about the mankind and the wider use. And I was really interested to ask you, how do you measure this? How do you feel about this? Obviously, I understand you will have a certain bias in your answer, but maybe you can just elaborate on these two aspects. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll start by saying that with New Shepard, we've flown 58 people to space and back to date, which is amazing. I think a lot of those people, a large percentage were women. A large percentage were first of nations, the first person from a specific country that's ever gone to space. And a lot of those people that have flown have said, it's been the dream of my life. I was inspired by Apollo, or I was inspired by an astronaut, and it's been the dream of my life to go to space. So first and foremost, it's pretty amazing that we live in a day and age where you can buy a ticket and go to space. We live in that time. That's amazing. And we all say in the space industry that we all want to democratize access to space. And that's an amazing tagline, except when you say that, you have to mean that you want anyone and everyone to be able to go to space, do something cool in space, start a business in space. So it doesn't matter if you're a celebrity or you're whoever you are, a trained astronaut, it doesn't matter, because as an industry, we're all struggling to hire enough engineers, for example. So that means not enough people are thinking about space. We're struggling in certain areas to not rely on government funding. That means not enough people are starting businesses and ideas in space. So all of us together, in my opinion, should want, one, as many people, regardless of who they are, to go to space as possible. Because that means that more people are going to come up with these amazing next generation space company ideas. The next person is going to come up with, something cool. The next person is going to say, I want to be involved in this, and then they're going to come work at one of our companies. So we should all want this. And then the last thing I would just say about, celebrities is, for example, our mission, which was amazing and was the first all-woman space flight since the first Russian woman went to space. So it had billions of impressions, not millions, billions of impressions across the internet. So if only, a couple 100 million of those were reached by, some young woman somewhere, or some, young person somewhere who was just excited and watching that mission, then that's contributing to all of us down the line, because that's inspired another person. So that's all, I would say about that is I think when you say democratizing access, we really have to mean it. And we should all be encouraging as many people, regardless of who they are or what their education is or what their background is, to be involved in space, or else we're not going to have this brilliant space future that we all want.
Excellent.
So that's what I would say.
So this was the inspirational speech to close up the panel. Thank you very much. And I believe we really want to give a big round of applause to our panel because we covered really a wide spectrum. Thank you very much.